What's up guys, welcome back to another video. Today I have an exciting video. We're actually heading over to my brother's house, right a place near him, and we'll be comparing lap times between me riding my own KTM 250 versus my brother's Husqvarna 250. Toward the end of the video, I'll be adding in some of my fastest lap times on each bike. We can watch the footage side by side, and then I'll talk through, where certain bikes were better and where some were slower. Let's get right into it. Before we jump into the riding footage, I wanted to give a quick overview of the bikes that will be compared and I'll be riding today. First, we'll take a look at the KTM, which is my bike, a 2017 KTM 250XC, so that's a two-stroke. So this is the newer generation of KTM after they introduced the counterbalancer and new frame, new geometry. From a performance standpoint, mostly stock AER air forks on the front, stock rear shock as well. And one of the biggest upgrades is an RK Tech high-performance head. And we'll see the impact of that. I think it's one of the biggest and best upgrades to really liven up a 252 stroke. And we also have an FMF gnarly pipe system with a turbine core silencer. Other than that, like I mentioned, from a performance standpoint, the bike's mostly stock. So with that, we'll get into the riding footage of the first few laps here on the turn track we're testing today. So the format of the video today will be fastest lap times on either bike. So I'll have the timer going on the screen here, and you can see that right as I pass that bush is really what I mark as the start of the lap. So we have about a 1 minute lap time or so here. So pretty short laps, just a flat grass track. So I'll kind of be quiet here for a little bit. We'll watch the two quickest lap times here on the KTM. We'll have the lap times pop up as we go. And then afterwards we'll show the Husqvarna, same situation, two fastest lap times. And afterwards we'll have some side-by-side footage. And there I can talk a little bit about what I liked about either bike, what I really thought made the biggest differences, and I think in the lap times that we'll see here. So there's the first lap down, and as I mentioned, as you can see, just under 1 minute there, so we'll see how the second lap compares. Another very consistent lap, just under 1 minute there. So again, bike I'm very familiar with. We'll talk a little bit about pros and cons in a minute here, but let's flip on to the Husqvarna. The next bike is a 2016 Husqvarna TE 250. So a pretty similar bike in two-stroke. The biggest difference being that this is actually the final year of the prior frame for the KTM and Husqvarnas before the counterbalance. And on this bike, a couple of key upgrades here. So one, the XC gear bar mounts, which right away can tell a big difference. We'll get into that a bit more as we get into the riding footage. And another big difference, as you remember on the KTM, we had the air forks. The Husqvarna here has Racetech Gold valves, more traditional spring forks. Otherwise, FMF, gnarly pipe and turbine core exhaust system, so same as the KTM. And for the most part then, pretty standard and pretty stock from a performance standpoint. So the same format here for Husqvarna. We'll have the timer start just as we pass this bush here again. And as a reminder, the KTM lap time is just under a minute, so we'll sit back and watch my laps on the Husqvarna and see how they compare. First lap put in there, so just about a second and a half slower than my fastest 2 laps on the KTM. And I did run, since this is not my bike, I did run a handful of laps before I started filming just to make sure I could get used to any of the changes. So we'll see if I continue to get better here on this second lap. Coming down here at the end of the next lap, again, very consistent, about 61 seconds, so a second and a half or so slower than the KTM. So we'll jump to some side-by-side footage here, and again, you can see we just paused it, so they're right at the same point around that bush. From a comparison point, I was very surprised at how little vibration I felt on Husqvarna. So given the Husqvarna was the older generation model before the counterbalancer, I expected to notice that significantly right away, and it really didn't make much of a difference. Now I don't know how much of that is the XC gear bar mounts, but I think those did make a big difference overall in front end feel. So on the lap, you'll see that the KTM's already pulling slightly ahead in the first 10 or 15 seconds here. And my brother and I both rode the bikes back to back. And we think the one biggest difference, honestly, was the KTM was just able to get up into the rev range a bit faster. So especially on a tighter turn track like this, kind of getting on the throttle just that tiny bit earlier really seemed to make a big difference. And what I didn't mention earlier is one of the big characteristic differences here is that I do have the red power valve spring in the KTM versus just the standard stock yellow in the Husqvarna. And again, I think just hitting that power valve and really getting into the meat of the power there a tiny bit earlier made a big difference. Overall, it felt like the Husqvarna had a little bit better of a bottom end, but really quickly as you got up into the mid and definitely upper RPM range, the KTM, you can tell a big difference. The Husqvarna with the Racetech Gold valves up front, traditional spring forks, did make a big difference. It felt much more sturdy up front. It was easier to kind of settle into each of the corners. Compared to the KTM, it did feel just a bit more harsh, even though honestly that's the forks I've been used to in riding for some time. So that's all for today's video. Please let me know what you think of the video down in the comments below. Please like and subscribe for more videos like this. Thanks.